Okay. Okay. Yep. There we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. I know I'm a little bit later than usual here, but such is life. Had a slightly busier evening than I normally do, and well, the show is not on a strict schedule for a handful of very specific reasons. My lack of payment, doing this just for I hate to I'm not patting myself on the back for this, but doing this for love of the game and my personal enjoyment and edification being, a giant part of fix that. A giant part of what's going on here. So, what do we got today? Well, we're going to be reviewing UFC Fight Night 285. The UFC was back in Sacramento for the first time in seven some odd years, and they're bragging about booking a bunch of mismatches. Should tell you the state of things, eh? We'll get into some of the implications of that. We will also preview next week. The UFC is back in Shanghai, and not. It's a little bit of an iffy card, but the main event's good. We'll give it the full rundown. You'll know the drill at this point. So that's and then news, such as it was kind of a slow news week, but we'll get into any and all of that because that's how we do it here. So, oh, sorry. Anything you can do to interact with the product is always appreciated, of course. Like, comment, subscribe, bell icon notification, whatever that doohickey is, and sharing. If you know someone you think might enjoy the show, throw them my direction. I appreciate any and all of that. You guys, again, I hate to repeat myself, but you know how that works. If you think someone could be, edified, might enjoy it. If you don't like them and you think they might not enjoy it, and you just kind of want to troll them, I'll take it. I'm not too proud to take that. So much appreciated. And yeah, let's jump into this, shall we? Because we've got stuff to do and I don't want to be here forever. It's again later than usual and nah, not that there's nothing to talk about, but I don't anticipate this going forever. But I mean, if you listen to this after the fact, then you know how long this goes, and I may be a complete liar. All right, let's go here, shall we? UFC Fight Night 285 review. Prediction results. It's where we always start. Um, Wound up going 10-3. What did we do? I changed. What did I? I changed my main event pick. Um, I changed Gaziv too. That was an easier call. Just rewatching some of. I'll talk about the main event in a second. Why I changed my mind. But the Gaziv one, like I rewatched Nzechukwu's last couple of fights, and when I'm not picking this guy, like I don't think very highly of Shamil Gaziv, but Nzechukwu just he never fights the same way twice. Like even if you find was it Jack Slack I saw make this joke? I don't know, somebody on X. Like the man just has a different fighting style every time he fights, even if he's found one that worked previously. He just will try something new. Um he just doesn't do well when he's actually like under pressure and getting hit. When he's the one moving forward, he's definitely got skill. I mean, I'm not pretending that he sucks, but I just wasn't going to pick him over a guy like Gaziv, who very, very, very flawed fighter, but he's going to make you hit him a lot and he's going to hit you back. And not to use the parlance of the young, I just kind of thought, Nzechukwu just didn't built like that. And then he fought the way he did. More on that when we get to it. So that was a fairly easy pick to change. That main event, though, I felt good about changing it. So I rewatched each guy's last couple of fights, and two things kind of stood out to me when I really looked at them. One for Gregory Rodrigues. I don't know why he prefers Rodriguez. He's Brazilian, but everyone does that with the hard R instead of the Brazilian, because Brazilian Portuguese does R's at the start of words like H's. But for some reason, there's a handful of guys who do who don't care if you do it's like Ronnie Yaya went back and forth a little bit between Hani and Ronnie. There's a few people like that come out. So I guess Rodriguez just doesn't care, or might even prefer if you say it that way. I don't know. But rewatching his last couple of fights, his last like 3 fights, if you look at him statistically, he's done a lot more body work in general, and that's against guys who aren't fluffy. So that was part of it. Then rewatching the last couple of fluffy fights, it's not just about Sean Strickland beating him. Let me bring this up for a second. Because I have the list, I have some of my notes, but there's a couple of things that stood out to me. I don't put too much stock in what he did to Michel Pereira because Pereira just collapsed. But if you look at that, it took him until the 5th round. Something about Pereira's defense. Bear in mind, like that really could have been stopped earlier, but rewatching it, it felt like Hernandez could have pushed the point a little bit more until and got the stoppage earlier. The Kopylov fight was one of those that made me kind of go, I don't know. Like he gets the win, but he has a tough first round. He kind of just guts through a lot of bad positions and a lot of really tough parts. The Brendan Allen fight, which I handily scored for him, but that and chunks of believe it or not, like he ruined Roman Dolidze. Well, more on Dolidze in a minute or two, but there was also large stretches of that fight where you can kind of see Dolidze. If guys like Brendan Allen is not a bad fighter, but you start to see if you watch a lot of those fights in sequence, people starting to figure out Hernandez. Now, some of those guys were not disciplined enough or good enough or well prepared enough or any number of things to fully realize sort of the high level or even some of the minutia of the tactics, because understanding tactically what you have to do against Hernandez is one thing. Doing it in the face of what he does in the cage, another one entirely. As the saying goes, no plan survives contact with the enemy. But you could see people starting to figure it out. And then that sort of culminates in the Strickland fight. And Sean Strickland, a lot of people don't have a good handle on him. I'm not saying I do. But watching that fight in particular, Sean Strickland trained with a very, very good team with Eric Nixick at Extreme Couture. And when he's willing to like make adjustments specifically towards some of the insights that Nixick has, or they have enough time to prepare for a specific guy, there's a lot about dude, rewatch that fight, man. Sean Strickland really shuts down the game of Anthony Hernandez. And rewatching that, it's not just that he loses. This is not saying that, oh no, one bad loss ruins Fluffy. It can, but I don't think it did. In the sense that, like, oh no, he's ruined. He took such a beating that he'll never be the same. But a lot of how that fight played out was sort of the culmination of a lot of coaches and a lot of fighters putting in a lot of work and having some real setbacks, but building an understanding of how Hernandez fights and knowing how, not only knowing how to deal with it, but understanding how and having the right fighters prepared to deal with it. And that just kind of became clearer. Like when you watch a lot of these, this is not just true of Hernandez. This is true in general. Like if you're able to have the time to watch several fights in a row, you start to see some of these things. Like he's not having the same success, not having no success, but when you only watch when you only watch the fights, when they happen live, big chunks of time pass And watching them all in a row provides different insight. That shouldn't be a monumental revelation or anything, but it did lead me towards the conclusion that a big chunk of Fluffy's game has been sort of figured out. Not completely deconstructed, not, universally solved, but the understanding of how to deal with him is a lot higher. And a lot of high level fighters are going to have a lot more success against him now than they did previously. And the question was still whether or not, Rodriguez could actually pull that off, but it was enough. It was enough for me to look at that and go, you know what? I think he's kind of been figured out. And that's a lot of what played out here when we get to the fight in particular. So I took a chance on that one, and I had to, boy howdy, end of the second and then third round, I was sweating that one because first two, it's not uncommon for Hernandez to struggle for the first couple of rounds, but just keep going, and eventually start finding success. And Rodriguez, never let him really do it. So 10-3. Anything that I got wrong that I think I should have got right? What did I get wrong? Most of these were not super hard. I'm okay getting the Jones and Medeiros fight wrong. I said it was closer than the odds were indicating, and boy did that play out. And then Medeiros gets a win. Jamal Emmers over Le'Veon Douglas. I'm okay getting that one wrong. Again, I think my reasoning was sound. It doesn't always lead to the correct outcomes because MMA is crazy. Yeah, I don't think I was gonna pick Dorsonville over Gage Young on short notice. I'm just gonna some of those you're just never. I shouldn't say never gonna get right. If you have more information than I had, you might have gotten that right. But I'm okay getting that one wrong. So 10-3. Year to date, 263, 83, and 3 with 2 no contests. I'm okay with that. I'd still like it to be higher, but we are where we are. So, as for the fights themselves, let's get into it. Main event. Gregory Rodrigues defeats Anthony Hernandez via unanimous decision, 248-47s and 149-46. I've got to be honest, man. The judging, not just in MMA last night, the judging in this fight was bad. There's some bad scorecards in that group. There's some real bad judging in boxing. More on that in a minute, because I do want to talk a little bit about that. But man, I think the only universal rounds were round three for Hernandez, which is no problem there. He won that round, and I think round 2 for Rodriguez was unanimous. Let me double check that. There's the scorecards. Let's have a quick look. The UFC lists these in reverse order. That's okay. Yeah, round 2 was universally given to Rodriguez, but the other 3 rounds, rounds 1, 4, and 5, were no. I don't think any judge. No, wait, round 4. Okay, round 4 universally went to Rodriguez. Okay. Chris Liebman, by the way, the 4-1 scorecard, only correct scorecard. If you go through this, Ron McCarthy giving Anthony Hernandez the first is wrong. If you squint real hard and are kind of dumb, maybe you can get to giving that to Hernandez, but he was on the wrong end of most of the relevant shots that round. You'd have to way overvalue his cage control, like pressing Rodriguez into the fence. That led to nothing. And then you had Derek Cleary giving round 5 to Hernandez, which I don't understand in the slightest. Not at all. So, yeah. Not some great scorecards from Ron McCarthy and Derek Cleary there. So how did this play out? Well, early, Rodriguez did a lot of good up and down work, jabbing both to the body and to the head, putting a few combinations together. Nothing serious. I don't think he threw much more than 3 at a time for for long stretches of the fight. But he went up and down. He landed some real hard calf kicks that messed with Hernandez pretty badly. I mean, he dropped him several times, I think 3 times in the second round with those. That second round, you could go 10-8. I thought Hernandez, with his late rally in the second, did enough to stave off the 10-8 personally, but you could go 10-8 there, and I think it would be perfectly acceptable. Kind of surprised no one did. But California is also real weird about 10-8s. Also, leg kick. Getting knocked down by leg kicks has some weirdly different calculus than getting dropped. First of all, knockdowns in MMA in general, I don't want to say they don't mean as much, but one, they don't carry the same automatic point penalties that they do in kickboxing or boxing. There's also no mechanism for determining a knockdown. It's supposed to be one of those, oh, I know it when I see it things, whereas it's the referee's job to call knockdowns in boxing. The referee says, no, he slipped, then it's not a knockdown. Whereas if the ref rules it a knockdown, you as a judge have to take a point basically from the guy who got knocked down. And calf kicks in particular, some of them can just be sweeps instead of more legitimate knockdowns in the traditional understanding. And frankly, those should be valued differently. Being swept is not the same as being dropped. That said, I think all 3 of those were legitimate drops, but I can see where there's a little bit of iffiness there. But Hernandez wound up going southpaw for big stretches, just trying to protect that leg. And his southpaw work was not. It was weird because it clearly threw off a little bit of Rodriguez offensively, but Hernandez southpaw didn't have all that much offensive potency either. Hernandez, he has incredible heart. He's still a little soft to the body. He got bothered a couple of times by body shots. Never the like, oh boy, half double over and suddenly I'm backing up or sink down. It was never quite that bad, but you could see him get like bothered and maybe back up, deterred a couple of times from some of that. And he started reacting a little bit worse to them, biting on feints, like really biting on them, which is never a great sign. But he didn't get paralyzed the same way he did against Strickland or whatnot. Part of that was, I don't think he got caught with anything quite as well timed as that knee from Strickland when they fought. But so there's something there that he's still trying to work through. His overall strategic game plan remains the same, and it's just kind of gut through bad spots with the assumption that I can make you work hard enough for long enough that your gas tank depletes and mine doesn't. And it's clearly not the worst strategy in the world. Look where it's gotten him. But there is a ceiling on that. And that needs to be, I think, understood and acknowledged a little bit at this point. At kicking range or the end of boxing range, Hernandez doesn't have a whole lot. He really wants to be in the pocket in either pocket boxing, or he wants to be in the clinch, but in a really good position. And his whole game, man, it's still trying to put you in the washing machine or the cement mixer or whatever your chosen metaphor for this. Getting you going up and down, getting you working really, really hard. And not just straining hard, but a lot of movement hard, which is different. And peppering in damage and slowly breaking you down over time. It's a very, very labor-intensive style. And it is clearly, as I mentioned, it served him well enough thus far. But people have started to pick up on his trends and his habits within that larger framework, and he doesn't have a plan B. I think was kind of the big takeaway for me in this fight. It's harder to say over the course of the Strickland fight because one, that only goes 3 rounds, and two, implementing any kind of it's just really hard to look good against Sean Strickland, first of all, and trying to get your game, the kind of game that Hernandez uses going against Strickland in particular, was always going to be difficult. I think I even picked Hernandez there for that fight. I'd have to double check, but this was a much more, I think, thorough auditing, sort of like examination and exploitation of the habits and tendencies of Anthony Hernandez than what Strickland did. I still don't think of this as an easy thing for just any fighter off the street to do, but the fact that I'd say guys not the level of Sean Strickland, former champion, now current champion, Gregory Rodrigues, who longtime veteran with a very, very good UFC record overall. Guys like that, they're gonna start having a lot more success against him at this point, because his game is a lot of, okay, I'm gonna be at a disadvantage in some of these positions, but I'm just gonna make you work, and I'm gonna gut through real bad ones and get to the clinch, and then I'm gonna either get you down or I'm going to slip behind you, and I will repeat everything to get to the clinch over and over again to get to the good position, and then really go to work from there. And he almost never got really good positions against Gregory Rodrigues. I mean, Rodrigues mounted him in the second round. He was very well prepared for the specific sequencing that Hernandez uses. It's a lot of grab a single leg, push to the fence into the clinch, and then switch to either a high crotch lift or a grip. If that doesn't work, go for a few trips, things of that nature. If that doesn't work, switch to a body lock, still try to get a little bit of motion and a sweep or a Polish takedown. Or it's not that his game is just like the very, very basics, but he tends to go through the same sequence. And once you get a handle on that, it's hard to break. And then you're stuck trying to kickbox at range with Gregory Rodrigues when you're not that good at it. Certainly not as good as him. And Rodrigues is smart enough to avoid the pocket firefight that Hernandez really wants, because if he's got to be on the feet striking, that's where he wants to be. And at range, he didn't have a whole lot. He did not do a great job addressing the calf kicks, and it really messed him up. The body work is still a bit of a problem for him. His chin and his heart, like if you punch that guy in the head, you better have, bricks, because Gregory Rodrigues is not a light puncher, and I don't think he bothered him too much to the head at all. I mean, he hit him there, but how many times did you see him really wobbled? But Hernandez just has to rework some stuff. There's just a real ceiling on, at this point, what his style and his implementation of it can do, especially with some of the habits that he has. His defense needs a lot of work. He needs a plan B. If plan A doesn't succeed, your plan can't be, I'm going to try plan A until plan A succeeds. Eventually, you run into guys that can just stop it for long enough to win, or, find a real opening to stop you. You've got to have plan B. C, preferably, as a bit of an outlier. But if you've only got the one gear and the one idea, it's going to catch up to you. And I think we're starting to see that with him. So, yeah, he's got some work to do. These last couple of fights have shown where he really needs to start focusing some of his time. And I hope he does, but he definitely needs to take some of those lessons to heart, or we've seen his ceiling. It's still very high, but we've seen the ceiling. As for Rodriguez, after the fight, he called out Dricus du Plessis. He's called him out before. I don't know. I don't know how realistic it is. Middleweight's still in a weird spot. We're not sure what there. Khamzat Chimaev does not deserve an immediate rematch. Let me stress that point. But the UFC might give him one anyway because when has deserve gotten you anything in the UFC? You do have DDP, who just got a really solid win over Kamaru Usman, one of his more like well balanced and complete performances, and he's already got 2 wins over Strickland. So he's looking at that level of fight. You've just got other guys who I think are not going to, at the very, very top, where I don't think going to be super interested in fighting Rodriguez. That said, realistically, he's going to be looking at someone like a Kyle Bahalio, or there's a fight coming up in the middleweight that's got 2 other top ranked guys, I think. Let me get a quick look at the rankings. Looking at middleweight. Yeah, because you've got Imavov and Allen, Pfeiffer. Pfeiffer might be a thought. Again, Imavov should be fighting for the belt, but the UFC don't like him, so who knows? Allen and Rodriguez could work. I think Allen's got a fight. I think there's a fight between that Allen has coming up, and that was sort of one of the things to complicate the matter. Yeah, so he's probably looking more realistically at Imavov, Allen, or Bahalio, would be my hunch. Outside shot at Pfeiffer, but that's kind of where he is on that. So DDP seems like a stretch. Is the only way to kind of phrase that. That said, before it's like I'm calling out the champ or this, now it makes a bit more sense. Like you just got your best win over a highly ranked guy ranked in the top 10, almost in the top 5. That's going to bump you up, and now it's more reasonable than some of the other times he's made that call out. So credit to that, more reasonable, but still a little unlikely. So that said, this was a good fight. Find this one if you haven't seen it. It's back and forth a little bit, with certain momentum swings, some really, really good defensive cage work from Rodriguez, some really smart offensive choices from him as well. Hernandez showing his guts and heart once again. Yeah, good fight. This was fight of the night and absolutely deserved to be to be the fight of the night. So co-main event, Vitor Petrino beat Sergey Spivak via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board. This fight sucked. Pretty ponderous performance out of Spivak. Petrino didn't do anything special. Just not a whole lot here. Reinier de Ritter, successful light heavyweight debut. He TKOs Roman Dolidze 4-1 of the first round. Dolidze tied up fairly quickly and then pulled guard and started trying to attack legs. De Ritter's ground and pound needs some work. When he's able to line up elbows, he can do some damage, but he's just not a very hard puncher, and generating power on the feet and generating power on the ground are not the same thing. There's some guys who, iffy on the feet, could unleash some hellacious ground and pound. His ground and pound doesn't look super devastating. I'm sure it's not pleasant, but his ground and pound style is a lot more accumulation than trying to land 1 or 2 really big blows that change everything. As I mentioned, though, he landed a couple of nice 12-6 elbows that definitely were some of his more effective strikes on the ground. So he's working on a little bit. Looked a lot healthier at 205. I'm still a little bit unsure of his ceiling. He's not very quick. He's very crafty and he's very skillful, but there's a degree of athleticism that is not quite there, that I think is gonna put a real limiter on him. That said, light heavyweight is a terrible division, so it matters a lot less here. Dolidze, I think Fluffy Hernandez kind of ruined him when they fought. Um, he's not really been the same. I'm not saying he's, pulling a Bob Sapp and going out here and giving up at the first sign of resistance. That would be an overstatement, but he he doesn't seem like his heart is really in this. Or if not, when I say his heart, like I'm not saying the guy doesn't train hard. I just mean you've got to have a certain something, both here and here, to really get through bad positions when you're taking damage. Be like, okay, we're still going through this. He doesn't quite seem to have that at this point, and it happens to everybody. So I'm not going to kill the guy for it. He's closing in on 40. Like, who would want to keep doing that at that point as a sort of general proposition? But does need to be said at this. I don't know. I don't know how much longer he should keep doing this. So good win for DeRitter. Curious to see what he does at light heavyweight still, because it's a crap division and it needs all the help it can get. Lightweight Markel Medeiros defeated Mason Jones via TKO, punches and elbows, 207 of the second. Pretty decent fight here. The stance switching and hand speed of Medeiros gave Mason Jones fits. Jones is a good fighter. He's put on some very exciting fights since returning to the UFC. This ended a good winning streak for him, but he's another guy who strong, but again, the sort of quickness that exacerbates that wasn't quite present here. Certainly in contrast to Medeiros. Like Medeiros made him look like he was moving at half speed almost at times, if you just compared the two. Um, Jones incredibly gutsy. He never went down. Like if you look at that finishing sequence, he gets battered. He gets clocked with an elbow in close. He throws it was a jab he threw, and Medeiros countered with a right elbow. He's kind of jab comes in, he steps into it and just over the top crushes him with an elbow. Badly hurts him, but he never goes down. He flurries against the fence like a madman, and Jones sags at one point, like doing the old sit down against the fence, but he never actually drops. Good win for Medeiros. Tough setback for Jones, but them's the breaks. This is a brutal sport. Hate to say it, because I like Mason Jones. He's a reliable action fighter, but he's got to get some of his defense ironed out, because Medeiros mentioned it. Like certain times when he's on offense, his offensive weapon doesn't come back the way it should, and he's not moving his head. He's not being mindful of the same side as his attack, and you've got to be cognizant of that. Women's flyweight Carly Judice defeated Jessilia Chavez via TKO, 139 of the first. Well-timed front kick to the body, folded up Chavez. Judice is doing what she can. There is not the women's side of things in the UFC right now. I'm going to talk about this for just a second. Last week, with UFC 330, was the first women's title fight all year for the UFC, and it didn't come until August. It is and let's not pretend that like Dern versus Robertson was a good fight. But you had to wait more than half the year into quarter 3 to get that going. Like I know they tried with the Harrison and Nunes thing, but that's just that's unacceptable. It just is. Like, how do you do that? Sort of compounding issues. There hasn't been a women's title fight ending via knockout or TKO in like 5 or 7 years? I think the last time it happened, no, it would have been close, like 5 or 6, because I think the last TKO title fight finish, irrespective of weight class, was what, when Rose head kicked Zhang. I think that was the last one. I mean, again, that's not that there were no finishes in female title fights since then, but that was the last one to end with strikes. Because there've been a handful of submissions, and that's not nothing, but the fact that we're that far removed from a strike related finish at the title level in the UFC is another sort of telling statistic. Judice, look, the UFC's been trying to rehabilitate some of these weight classes. Judice is a solid addition to women's flyweight. She's going after it. She's getting stoppages. Can't ask for a whole lot more than that. You got Fatima Klein kind of doing the same thing at strawweight. So there's a few people trying to buck the trend and get some life back into this, but it's a hard road to hoe at this point, is maybe the only way to say that. So good win for Judice here. Very good. And kicking off the main card, Anthony went with a technical submission arm triangle choke over Terrence Chapman at 4:29 of the first round. Went just the vastly superior athlete. Got a few punches off, hit a pretty decent takedown. On top, his ground and pound didn't look great in this fight. Some of that was Chapman grabbing a dude. You almost went. I'm gonna be as kind as I can with this. He's very green. Dude almost got Kimura swept from half guard, which, I mean, against a better jiu-jitsu player, you would have been in serious trouble there, my man. His arm triangle finish was nice. Once he kind of got to the position, he passed smoothly. Some of the finishing mechanics of the choke could have been tightened up. I mean, he clearly got it. The big one was his hips were a bit high. He did have was his left leg, but this is one of those things where a lot of the UFC commentary is behind the curve. Because Michael Bisping was talking about this, who just never shuts up on commentary. It's really aggravating. The old theory was you had to get all the way to side control, drop your hips, drop your chest. You can still do that, by the way, but hang on. And they're still talking about it like that's the only way to finish the choke. The modern game has added a couple of wrinkles to that. One of them is whichever side you're going to. In this case, it was Wint going to his right. You do want to keep your near leg. So if you're going to your right, that's your left leg. You keep that over their hip, kind of not quite knee on belly, but your hips go to the side and then drop, but your leg stays over there to prevent them from turning in. Because one of the ways to survive you still get into a bad position, but if you're being choked, if I'm being choked on this side, one of the ways to deal with that is to get my body turned that direction. So if I'm here, I'm going to rotate this way to try and get some space here. And again, the guy attacking you can still get to your back and can transition to, they call it like the Ruotolo version or the Kaiju choke, or there's a bunch. It's still not great. because you're giving up your back, but you're not going to get choked if you can get some motion that way. It's one of the, it's, not the first line of defense necessarily unless you get there real quick. But again, the sort of modern arm triangle attacking game is keeping that leg over the hips as a block and a resistance point to them trying to turn. So he hit that. And again, the sort of UFC commentary team being out of the loop on that one. Because they were talking about like, you got to get all the way to side control. Like, no, you don't. Like that leg can stay there. In fact, maybe should, because it blocks one of the defensive options and escapes. Clearly had a really good squeeze. And at heavyweight, there's a handful of submissions that work better at heavyweight. This is not body shaming. Okay. Some of these work on guys who are jacked to the gills. But there's a lot more connective tissue and there's a lot less mobility in certain plays. Like there's plenty of, lighter weight class guys that get Americana'd and just don't really care that much. Or there's enough play and enough flexibility in the shoulder for them to, move around a little bit. It's not quite as immediate a threat. Dude, you get a heavyweight up there with going like that, there's just not as much mobility in the joints. There's just more stuff there that hinders some of that. And there's certain chokes that get opened up a little bit more at heavyweight because you got bigger shoulders sometimes and bigger trapeze. Like it's just easier to compress everything when there's more there. So went solid win. A lot of work to do still with him, but the UFC's probably going to be. Look, if the UFC wants to sign guys like this, they're going to need to take some of them along slowly. And that's not my favorite thing, but the UFC is not what it was when that was an unthinkable thing almost at a certain point in time. So, yeah, again, went for what it was, looked pretty good. He made some noise because he won his contract on the Contender Series 11 days ago and just made a very, very quick turnaround and then joked about fighting in China on Saturday. So, a lot of those guys who come from the Contender Series, they try to burn through that first contract as quick as you can because it is not great. More on that later. On the prelims, Jamal Emmers got a really nice TKO win over Le'Veon Douglas, 338 of the first with punches. Douglas did a lot of good work early, had some real strong calf kicks going, got a little bit predictable with his pressure, and Douglas jab that did okay, and then right hand that just kind of slipped into the guard, punched Douglas right in the eye. And it's hard to be that accurate, but if you either get lucky or if you're that good, either way, actual legal blows to the eyes will mess someone up in a hurry. Douglas immediately like, nope, something's wrong. We ain't doing this. Yeah, that was tough. That was a real come down moment from Douglas, who looked, had a really good UFC debut and actually looked pretty good here for a while. Like, but Emmers is not someone you should sleep on. I picked Douglas here, and I'm okay being wrong. But yeah, so we'll see. Hopefully, no major injuries to Douglas because I still think he's definitely got some upside. But yeah, solid win for Emmers. Shamil Gaziev knocked out Kennedy Nzechukwu, 120 of the first round. Nzechukwu just hands down trying like Stephen Thompson or Anderson Silva shenanigans. Terrible decision. Just gets back to the fence, then dinked on the chin with a right hand. Bonk. Yeah, terrible. Chris Padilla. This was a good win for him. Defeats Nasrat Hakparas via technical submission arm triangle, 459 of the third. First two rounds a little bit close, a little bit slower on the action. Padilla, some good front kick work from him. Not a lot of leg kicks. I was kind of surprised he wasn't going because they're opposite stances. Haqparast fights southpaw. Surprised he didn't throw at the lead leg a little bit more, but front kicks were pretty good. His high guard was blocking a lot of what Haqparast was throwing back. Kept trying to intercept with elbows, which he couldn't quite time for a lot of it. I thought Padilla won the second. I thought Padilla had the first. I thought Haqparast had a better second round. He started getting a bit more of his punches through, pressure, was able to pressure inside the kicking range, and that's where he wanted to be a bit more. And some pretty good body kicks of his own. Third round is a lot more of the same. And then right near the end, coming out of a clinch, Padilla just coming out of an exchange, not a clinch, rather. Padilla started going forward a lot more towards the end of the third. Haqparast gets a little bit wild and gets dropped with a right hand. He wrestles back up. Padilla keeps after him, elbows him, gets to the clinch, grabs the standing arm triangle choke, slams him down, holds it, chokes him out. The round ends. The referee pulls them off, sees that because this isn't one of those things where chokes in, round ends, and the ref's like, hey, let him go. And Padilla's like, huh, what? No, okay, now I'll let him. Wasn't that just referee's like, okay, fight's over. Padilla gets up, and Haqparast is very clearly unconscious. And Frank Trigg was the referee. Right call. Immediately goes, nope, we're done. He was unconscious before the round ended, and you can't be saved by the bell. So Padilla really turning it up the last minute and a half there, 2 minutes give or take. I would like to see him start getting going earlier. If I'm going to be super critical, I don't mind that he's patient, but there's patient and then there's letting way too much of the fight slip away. If this had gone the distance, without that knockdown, I know that's a little bit of revisionism, but I don't know how this would have been scored. I mean, I could look it up, but that doesn't really matter. I'm making a general point here. I would like to see Padilla start getting going a little bit earlier in fights. It doesn't need to be berserker stuff, but he is constantly putting himself in some dangerous scoring positions by just kind of letting these close rounds go by and go by and go by. But he's good. And when he does get going, you can really see that. I mean, even when he's not rolling downhill, you can still see what makes his game function. His defense is real good. He's very creative with some of his offense. He's willing to fight in different ranges and has appropriate weapons for different ranges. Those are all very good things. So I'm not trying to kill the guy. I'm just, if I'm going to be critical, if I'm going to say, what do we take away from this that we can really work on? I would like to see him start forcing the issue a little bit more consistently, a little bit sooner. But he's the one in there fighting, not me. I'm just a dude. Marcio Barbosa knocked out Ryan Coos, 247 of the first, mismatch. Coos took this on somewhat short notice, and Barbosa just clipped him with a left hook. Caught him not way back here on the temple, but right about here. That'll rattle your brain, folks. And he was down. Good call by the ref when he stopped this. I need to see Barbosa against, I don't need to see him fight like ranked opposition, but I don't need to see these fights. I don't need him in squash matches. Let's bump him up a little bit. Yeah, because he looks like the goods. Stan Dorsonville, upset win, defeated Gage Young via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. Good first round from Young. Dorsonville rebounds in the second. Third round, tight. I was kind of surprised this wasn't split. I thought Young took the third, but not at all wrong to give that to Dorsonville. Good fight overall. Another one that you could get some time to check out. Jackson McVeigh TKO'd Wesley Schultz. Oh, this is another one I changed. I forgot to mention it earlier. I mentioned when I previewed this, I needed to see them next to each other. I did. Okay. McVeigh should be able to use his range effectively here. Schultz, not only grappling heavy, but he does a lot of jumping for guillotines. I'm not saying having a good front headlock series isn't a really good thing. It definitely is, but you better have lights out guillotines if you're going to be jumping them that early. And if you don't, your striking and what you have on the feet to offer better be better than what he's got. Really nice knee to the body to finish things from McVeigh. Caught Schultz stepping in. Started, he's southpaw, so kind of started on the liver side and then just swiped all the way across the body. Brutal. Folded him up like a lawn chair right away. Yeah, good stuff out of McVeigh there. And kicking everything off, Chanel Dyer defeated Elise Reed via TKO punches and kicks and whatever else she wanted. 142 of the third. We didn't need the third round here. So Elise Reed gets beat up in the first, gets more beat up in the second, and going back to the third says, I don't know what I have left. And her corner goes, do you want me to stop it? Because if you've got nothing left, I don't want you back out there. Good sentiment. But I wish corners would be a bit more proactive here. He kind of left this up to her. And he said, like, I'm okay stopping this. Like, if you don't have anything, if you don't have anything out there, we can go home. Like, that's, and good on him for saying that, for being aware of it. And she just said, no, I don't want to quit. I respect that. I really do. But at the corner, letting the fighter decide that is not really your job. Your job is to make the best decision for your fighter. We did not need another 100 seconds of Elise Reed getting hit in the face. It didn't serve any purpose at all. They probably should have stopped this between rounds. So, for whatever that's worth, Dyer, another one. Young, experienced, especially in like the Muay Thai side of things. But another fighter they're trying to inject into the women's side of things to get some life going. Again, they need it. I'm not complaining. Dyer looks okay through her first couple of fights, but they're kind of still giving her borderline squash matches. So that's the card. A lot of finishes, which the UFC was happy to tout. And any of us who've been around, kind of pointed out, well, when you book Strikeforce style mismatches, you get results like this. A lot of these were mismatches, which resulted in finishes. I've been around a long time, not the longest, but I've been around a long time. I vividly have this memory. So there was a UFC event. This is many, many years ago. And at the post-fight thing, Dana White was asked about a card they had, because the card they had went almost all decisions. And whoever was asking him the question, I forget who it was. Somewhere in my head, like, transposes this to be Ariel Helwani, but don't quote me on that. I don't know. But asked them about contrasting that with the Strikeforce card that just happened, where I think all the main card were finishes. And Dana White said, and this was when he was still checked in and plugged into what was going on, he said, look, we could do that if we wanted to. We could book fights like that. We don't want to do that. We want to have the best fight the best. Sometimes that means you get finishes. Sometimes it means you get close fights that go the distance, because that's what happens when you have that level of competition fighting each other. We don't want to make fights like Strikeforce just put on, because the main event for that card, if memory serves, I know the fight he was referencing, I think it was the main event, was Robbie Lawler against Matt Lindland, who had like no knees and was 40 something. And Robbie knocked him out in short order. Let me look up how long ago that was. Robbie Lawler versus Matt Lindland, 2010. Yeah, hang on. So yeah, this is 2010. Oh no, the main event was Dan Henderson and Babalu Sobral. Yeah, the main card is for that is almost all finishes. But Babalu's over the hill. Dan Henderson knocks him out in less than 2 minutes. Paul Daly knocks out Scott Smith. That's actually a kind of a wild fight for a 2-minute affair. Bigfoot Silva TKO's Mike Kyle because that was kind of a joke. And yeah, Robbie Lawler knocks out Matt Lindland in 50 seconds because Lindland is mega washed. Dana White got up, was asked about this, and because this is December 4th, 2010, and so what would the UFC event have been? Okay, let's bop on down here. Oh, keep going. Come on. No, that's 2012. 2010. December of 2010. So we're looking at what? UFC probably 124? Have a quick look there. No, wouldn't have been that one. Might have been 125. Yeah, I think this is UFC 125 is one that we're kind of talking about. Maybe it was somewhere in that vicinity. Oh no, it was the tough finale. Right, because the tough finale had all decisions on the main card. Leonard Garcia and Nan Pham, terrible judging in that fight, by the way. Nam Pham got robbed. Rick Story, Johnny Hendricks. That was a good win for Story, maybe the best he ever wound up having. Damian Maia, Kendall Grove, Despida, who was actually in attendance at a event last night. Stefan Bonner defeated Igor Prokhrayach, and then Jonathan Brookins, Michael Johnson, which was the tough finale. But yeah, they all went the distance. And after that fight, he was asked about it. Yeah, that happens sometimes when you match make appropriately versus what Strikeforce had just done. And it was that's like the only way you can sort of counter that argument. And look, it's not like Garcia and Nam Pham was actually a really good fight. Again, Pham got robbed on the scorecards because Garcia should have lost that, like many fights that he won unfairly. But it was a good fight. And the UFC has just over the last couple of years started leaning more into that like Strikeforce Bellator level of matchmaking where they're not, I'm not saying they never have like the two best guys fighting, they do. But that's not sort of the ethos that permeates a card anymore. There were a lot of fights on this last card that were fairly heavy odds wise. And yeah, sometimes that means you get upsets. But the UFC is like matchmaking to try and get viral moments rather than best fight the best. And I've been around long enough to remember when they were fundamentally opposed to that, at least when questioned about it. So yeah. Last thing about okay, a couple of more things before we move on. Come on. Get my camera to focus up here. I already mentioned it, but the fight of the night was Rodrigues versus Hernandez, which was absolutely deserved. There we go. Performances went to Markel Medeiros and Carly Judice. You were, I mentioned, kind of spoiled for choice. Can't argue with that. Can't really argue with that one. So here's the other thing, though. Because this took place in the state of California. California still reports disclosed fight purses. And we have a little bit of math on this as well, so bear with me here. But if we go down the disclosed payout, Gregory Rodrigues is on 170 and 170. So is Anthony Hernandez. So those two were equally there. This is really about just a couple of places. So Markel Medeiros being on 24 and 24. Mason Jones on 33. Yeah, the big couple of ones I want to touch on. Anthony Wint, 10 and 10. Because that's what you get when you come off the Contender Series. Le'Veon Douglas was on is 12 and 12 at this point because he's also coming off the Contender Series. So, dude took serious eye damage for 12 grand. Marcio Barbosa is just 12 and 12 again. I think his second fight after his contract. Dude, those Contender Series contracts are brutal. You come in at 10 and 10. Your second fight, I think it's like 10 and 10. Your second fight is 12 and 12. Then I think 15 and 15. But it just slowly graduates through like 6 fights. When you see guys come off the Contender Series and they fight a lot, they're trying to burn through that as quickly as possible because, oof. I mean, the UFC signing guys, some of them are good. And they're paying them less than a third-round draft pick to the WNBA. And the WNBA has never been profitable, ever. The WNBA is propped up. It is subsidized by the NBA. It's kind of why it exists. Because the NBA pays it to exist. The UFC is ludicrously profitable. But anyway, my point there is if you do the math on this, not only disclose, so you have all between all the disclosed purses and the bonuses, both the of the night bonuses and the flat 25K finish bonus that you get. The UFC paid out around $2 million. I think was the final math on that. All right, so it was something like that. It was less than 3. I think was the way the math worked. Let me see if I can find that actually. Hang on, I want to make sure I'm remembering this correctly. Oh, geez, did I not? All right, let me have a quick look here. I should. I could have sworn I'd seen that. Oh, if I can't find this, I'm just going to move on. Because yeah, I'm not quite going to find the math I had on this. Ugh, I'm annoyed by that. Okay, here's what I remember of the math. I should have saved that better. It goes like this. If you math out the UFC getting $1.1 billion a year from Paramount, which is, bear in mind, just from Paramount, say nothing of all their other revenue streams, that breaks down to something like $22 million a card If you divide 1.1 billion by the 43, I think, events, 40, 43, 44 events they're going to produce, you get about 22 million an event. And they paid, I think, like 10 or 11% of the rev split from just that with this, which is comically low. And that says nothing of the gate, which was north of 3 million. That says nothing of any other rights fees that they have. That's literally just the Paramount money. And the rev split on that is abysmally low. Look, you can mock Roman Dolidze getting 180 grand for his fight because he did not fight very well. I grant you. If you think the UFC should cut him, I'm not going to argue, but dude, they deserve more. They just do. But those Contender Series contracts, man, I think your contract to fight in the Contender Series is 5-5. Your first UFC fight is 10-10, second 12-12. Again, it graduates up a little bit each fight, but though your short notice contracts from the UFC. So if they call you in on short notice, you come in on 12-12. So but man, like those are brutal. And you can argue the UFC may be trying to like sift the wheat from the chaff, but if this is the model you want to use, guys, like you don't have the luxury because you have to put out the number of fights, the number of events that you have to put out. If your argument is you don't want to pay a lot of money for fighters that aren't that good, then limit your number of events, refine what you put out, and we'll accept the argument. Then just pay everyone more to begin with. But anyway, this is part of the reason the UFC doesn't come to California all that often is California still reports purses, and the UFC doesn't like that. Anyway, full report in the MMA zone of 411mania.com. Go give it a read if you're so inclined. I always appreciate it. Alrighty, let's move on. I kind of wanted to be faster with that, but well, here we are. This Saturday, early in the morning, 3 a.m. Eastern for the prelims, 1 a.m. my time, because I have done some terrible things in my life, and I guess I deserve this. Okay, come on, wake up, mouse. I need a new one. This one has done what it can to be faithful, but it is time. It's time to retire it. UFC Fight Night 186, live again early in the morning from Shanghai, China. So I'm going to have a long night Friday to Saturday, but that happens. Main event. Okay, what do I need? Yeah, I'm going to need a couple of things here. Okay. So main event, bantamweight fight. Good fight, actually, here in the main event. Umar Nurmagomedov, former title challenger, taking on perennial contender-ish guy, Song Yadong. This is a good fight. It's a very relevant fight. Sorry, I gotta scroll a bit here. It's definitely relevant. Both guys are ranked. And Umar has been in the top, fought for the belt, has been widely respected as a top guy. His only loss is to Marab in a competitive fight. 2-fight winning streak since losing the belt. He beat Mario Bautista. He beat Davison Figueiredo, both by unanimous decision, which is maybe the knock on him. He has He has 3 finishes in the UFC. Had that wild fight in his debut with Sergey Morozov, where he got a submission. He choked out Brian Kelleher in fairly short order. He stopped Honey Barcelos. but that was in 23, and he hasn't had a finish since. Went the distance with Bexat Almakhan. He went the distance with Corey Sandhagen. Sandhagen's good. Went the distance with Marab. Went the distance with Batista, and went the distance with Figueiredo. The Figueiredo going the distance one is maybe the one that I'm like, you maybe should have found a way to win that to get a finish there, but Umar has very good skills. Very, very quick, dexterous lead leg. Can wrestle, but a bit more of a striker. Ground and pound a little bit iffy. Didn't quite have the motor to match Marab, but almost no one does. So I don't hold that too much against him, especially since you could maybe have still scored that fight for him. Yeah, Umar's still very good. And Song is certainly a very good fighter. He's been with the UFC for a while. I think part of the problem with Song is we've pretty well seen his ceiling, it feels like. If you want to run through let me run through his career in the UFC real fast. So he enters the UFC on a 2-fight winning streak. Beats Bharat Kandare, beats Felipe Aranches, beats Vince Morales, beats Alejandro Perez, goes to a draw with Cody Stamann, which he should have won, but he illegally kneed Cody Stamann and got a point deducted, which was entirely fair. He beats Marlon Vera, loses to Kyler Phillips. He has a real life and death kind of fight with Casey Kenny, of all people. He beats Julio Arce. He beats Marlon Moraes when Moraes was washed. Loses to Corey Sandhagen because Corey Sandhagen carved him up like a turkey. That was stopped after the 4th round. If you've never seen that fight, Song is hard charging coming forward, and Corey is superior technician, better footwork, craftier. He's hitting him a lot for the first couple of rounds, but he can't deter him. Realizing that he can't hit the guy hard enough to deter him, he starts elbowing him on those ways in because, hitting someone with this is mean. And he just opened him up, messed up his eyes, got him all cut up and swollen, and the doctors had to step in. He then beats Ricky Simone, beats Chris Gutierrez, loses to Piotr Jan, beats Henry Cejudo. That was a weird fight. Loses to O'Malley in a fairly lackluster performance. Then he's coming off a win over Davison Figueiredo where he guillotined him, which certainly was not a bad outing, but we've kind of seen the ceiling. It's not impossible for him to break through, but at this point, I do think it would be unexpected for him to break through and really make a serious push up. He's still very good. He's still a top 10 guy, but he's really struggled to find the gear and find the adaptations to his game that will get him over that last hump. And I've said this before, he's with Team Alpha Male, and making those kinds of adjustments when you hit the wall like that is not really a thing Team Alpha Male has historically demonstrated a great aptitude for. There's a lot of things they are very, very good at. It's not a bad gym, but you have to look at what you need. And I don't know that they're equipped, and certainly history would suggest they are not very good at this, with getting Song to adjust, or anyone. They find not everyone who fights out of there fights the same way like they used to. It used to be very, very homogenous. It's a little more diversified now. But they kind of just okay, how do you want to fight? Help you get pretty darn good at that. But you don't switch gears with them very often. How many wrinkles do you add to your game, much less serious new looks? And Song, he's good. He's got tons of heart. He's got a very, very good chin. He's got good power. He's pretty explosive. He's been with the UFC for a lot of fights now, and there's a lot of tape on him, and a lot of people have started to really figure him out. It's a bad spot to be when you're fighting Umar. Umar is not the most dynamic fighter in terms of like rapidly switching game plans or anything, but he's very well prepared. He's going to be well prepared for this. And I have a real hard time picking against Umar here. Now, let me check the odds because I think if you discounting Song here would be a giant mistake. I don't think he's. Ugh. You're looking at like plus 400 or so on Song. That I wouldn't feel great about that one. I'm okay picking Umar. I'm going to pick Umar. If you asked me what odds I thought accurately reflect the probability of Umar's victory, instead of being like minus 500, I'm probably more like minus 375. Minus 375, minus 380. Like I'm not quite this high. Still very, very solidly, with Umar there, but not again. I'm not sure those odds reflect what I would consider the likelihood of that particular outcome. They're still favor Umar, but I don't know. I just wouldn't be comfortable having to pay out plus 400 on that one. Co-main event, another pretty decent fight actually. Yeah, there are some good fights here on this card overall. Let me start there. There's some that make you go, but this is actually a pretty strong card with a handful of interesting fights up and down it that need to be taken seriously. Yan Xiaonan and Denise Gomes is a fight you should take seriously. Yan has failed to win the belt at least once. Yeah, just once. Her UFC losses. She went a long time without losing, then got TKO'd by Carla Esparza, which is a rare Esparza finish at that time, 2021. Tough split decision to Marina Rodriguez. Beat Mackenzie Dern. Stopped Jessica Andrade, actually. Didn't just beat her, stopped her. That got her a title shot, which she got beat to crap by Zhang Weili. They should have stopped that fight in the first when Zhang basically TKO'd her, but the ref didn't. They should have stopped it in the second when Zhang choked Yan out. Yan didn't tap, the round ended, and for some reason, the ref didn't look at Yan unconscious and go, "Hey, you lost." They just kind of let her revive, and then we kept going. She beat Tabitha Ricci and then lost to Virna Jandiroba. That was April of last year. She's been out for a minute. Gomes, young, only 26. Only UFC losses are to Loma Lookboonmee and Angela Hill. Currently on a 4-fight winning streak. She's beaten anyone all that good. Karolina Kowalkiewicz is washed. Elise Reed is not very good. Tisha Pennington also, that was her first fight back in quite a while after giving birth, and just not super impressed with that one. Yeah, this. Have a quick look at some of the tail of the tape here, because Gomes is, if memory serves, not super big for the weight class. Yeah, she's 5'2" with a 63-inch reach. Again, she's young, only 26. Yan, 5'5", also a 63-inch reach, though. Okay. The age is a big deal there, though. Yan is 37. So you're looking at, 10 years, give or take. That's a big deal. That said, Yan is probably Gomes likes to strike, but only really succeeds against people who aren't comfortable fighting her like that. And the women she struggled against, Hale and Lukbunmi, were happy to engage her on those terms. I'm kind of leaning Yan. Not a lot, but I think Yan is just willing to fight on those terms, and Gomes has to be able to bully you there. And Yan, if nothing else, man, she is not going to be bullied. Yeah, the odds are slightly with Yan. They're kind of where I am on that one. But relevant fight for the division. The Gomes is someone they're trying to really boost up, and beating Yan would be a really big win for her. And like I said, I'm gonna lean Yan, but if you pick Gomes, there's very, very good reason to do so. Bantamweight next, Orichi Long and Kai Asakura. So Orichi Long, another dude who's been around for a surprisingly not a long time, but feels like a bit of a long time. He only debuted in 21. He's bounced a little bit between flyweight and bantamweight. Been at bantamweight for a couple of years now. Coming off a loss to Cody Haddon. He beat Cody Gibson before that. Just up and down a little bit and hasn't really found his footing. Asakura had a rough start to his UFC run. I mean, they threw him into a title fight right away. And, okay, lost to Alexandre Pantoja. Oh, the horror. The loss to Tim Elliott was a little bit more troubling because Elliott, crafty, but over a little bit past it at this point. So he returned to bantamweight. He got a good knockout over Cameron Smotherman. I'm torn on this one. I kind of want to lean towards Asakura. Yeah, the odds are really with him. Again, Orichi Long just not a bad fighter to have on any given card. He's rarely in bad fights. But Asakura looked pretty good in his bantamweight debut. Yeah, I'll go with Asakura. I don't mind that. Let's see. Flyweight next, Sumudarji and Alex Perez. Not a bad fight here either, actually. So Sumudarji, 30. Yeah, these two fought to a no contest back in May in China. Yes, Sumudarji wound up kicking Perez low, and Perez couldn't continue. I threw no aspersions at Alex Perez for not being able to continue after that groin kick because that was a bad one. And Perez, generally speaking, doesn't strike me as a malingerer trying to get out of fights. He was struggling in that fight though. I might still favor Sumudarji. The odds lean his way. I got to rewatch that fight. I'm going off of memory, and I'm not convinced my memory is accurate about it. So I'm going to double check that, but I'm okay respecting the odds at the moment. A light heavyweight fight. Yay. Let's see. Liu Say. I can't remember how to pronounce CE, and so forgive me. But Liu is making his UFC debut. Not a lot of MMA fights. In fact, he's 3-1. Fairly lengthy kickboxing record through the K1 world. I'm going to see too many. If there's a whole lot of names I recognize on his list there. Oh, maybe a couple. I'm gonna have to double check his kickboxing. He's fighting Junior Tafa, who not super great. Coming off a loss to Iwo Baraneski. In fact, he is just 2-5 in his last 7. That's a rough stretch. With his wins, one heavyweight win over Sean Sharaf, who's just not very good. Dude got choked out by Tuco Tokos, choked out by Billy Alacana, beat Kevin Christian on somewhat short notice, but yeah, he's kind of being set up here. I don't know that I have a good reason to pick again to think that something's going to go sideways there. Wait, did this fight change? I'm seeing that this fight may have changed. Hang on. Yeah, that fight. Yeah, Tafa fell out of that. Okay, hang on. Let me have a look at his new opponent. His new opponent is Levi Rodrigues Jr., who is 5-1. I would easily have picked Quay over Leo over Tafa. Junior here, 5-1 with a no contest. He lost. He went to a no contest on the Contender Series, but all right, he got a win, but failed a drug test. He got stopped by Felipe Franco. Okay. I'm still gonna lean towards Liu, but I would have, like I said, pretty handily picked him over Tafa, but that's not quite as clear in this instance. And kicking off the main card rather, excuse me, at flyweight, we have Bilal Hassan and Nilson Rojas. So if we take a look at these two, Hassan is Indonesian, 9-0 with a no contest. Is this a road to UFC thing? No, he's coming off a very quick Contender Series win though, so time to earn your 10 grand, kid. Rojas is Peruvian. There's some Peruvian guys that have made their way to the UFC. They're kind of putting forth some effort. Undefeated, 9-0. Making his UFC debut. That's a tough one. I may just go with the odds here. The odds like Hassan by a lot, actually. I would not be comfortable with the odds on this one. Let me start there. You've got Hassan at like minus 700 in some places, minus 650. That strikes me as insanity. You got a guy with 10 fights against another guy with a similar number of fights, both undefeated. Let me respect the odds at the moment, but I want to see. I will look up a couple of Rojas fights and a couple of Hassan fights and have a more informed opinion if I can get one. When I make a final determination. So that's your main card. Prelims. Andre Lima and Namsrai Batbayar. Lima had a really weird fight his last time out. That loss to Kevin Borjas was a weird one. He just looked not great. He looked pretty solid up to that point in the UFC. The win over Igor Severino, which was because Igor got DQ'd for biting him. The Metroposo fight was pretty solid. The Felipe Dos Santos win was pretty solid. Daniel Barres win was solid. Then the loss to Borjas. Borjas is not bad. So it's not like it's a terrible loss, but Give a quick look at Bayard. But yeah, Lima just looked kind of lifeless in that fight, which was really weird. Bayard is 10-1. I think he's what, 1-0 in the UFC. No, he's sorry, one sec. Sorry, you didn't need to hear me sneeze there. He won a road to UFC event, all finishes. Good for him. His only loss is to Niamjargal Tumendemberel, who, in the UFC I still think at the moment, and pretty darn good. So he's not getting a gimme. Lima's very legit. So that's actually a pretty solid fight overall. Oh no, Batbayar's the guy who had that really sick knee against the fence. When he was like, "Oh no, you're not." No. Like he posted the guy up, got him tipped over, and he was down on one. He was on one hand, on one foot, and braced on one hand down, and that's not down. So he then got kneed in the head a couple of times. I remember that. That was nice. What are the odds on this one? I may go Batbayar just kind of for funsies. Yeah, the odds like Lima. That's very understandable. Lima's very good. Something about that Borjas loss, though, it's sticking in my head. Like he looked not good. I don't think I picked a dog yet. Let me go with Bayard. I don't feel great about that, but sorry. You know what? Let me asterisk that. I reserve the right to. I reserve the right to feel differently in the morning with a full night's sleep under my belt instead of where I am right now, which is longer than I want to be awake when I do this. One of these days I'll figure this out and not have that as an excuse. But speaking of flyweights and speaking of Kevin Borjas, he is fighting Ray Saruya. Good fight. I said Borjas is a pretty darn good fighter. Um, he's 11-5. Am I confusing him with somebody? Hang on, I might be. He's just 2-4 in the UFC. And he's coming off he missed weight in the Lima fight too. So what's he done in the UFC? He lost to Josh Van and Alessandro Costa. Both very good fighters. He beat Ronaldo Rodriguez. Lost to Sumu Darji, lost to Emmanuel Rodriguez, then beat Andre Lima. Okay. Yeah, he's not bad, but who the heck was I confusing him with? I don't remember. I was thinking of some. I looked at his picture finally. No, that's not the guy I was thinking of. That's weird. Anyway, Saruya 11-1, 2-1 in the UFC. He beat Carlos Hernandez in his UFC debut. He lost to Joshua Van. Oh, the horror. Then he kind of ran over Luis Garule his last time out. My issue with Saruya is fairly straightforward. He's a good wrestler and a pretty good overall grappler, but his striking is iffy, and some of his shots, if he's not comfortable, come from way too far outside. And a lot of guys have been. He's had some trouble. That was a big problem when he fought Joshua Van. He was shooting from way too far outside. But it turns out Joshua Van's pretty darn good. So my hunch is Saruya. I'm gonna check the odds. Yeah, the odds really like him. Jeez, is he the biggest favorite on the card? It's him or Hassan, depending on where you look. Yeah, so not very daring of me to pick Saruya here, but God, who the heck was I confusing Kevin Borthaus with? Because I still don't think he's bad. Let me stress that a second time, but he's not who I was thinking of, and that's going to bug me until I remember it. Bantamweight next, we have Xiao Long and Francesco Nuzzi. Let's have a quick look at these two gentlemen. So Long, 27-11, yeah, very experienced guy. He struggled in the UFC though. 1-2, yeah. So he lost a road to UFC finals, got to the UFC anyway, beat Kwong Lee. Then yeah, he's had a rough couple of fights. He had very little to offer Su Young Yu. He lost to Cody Garbrandt in 2026. That I hate saying that says something because I'm not trying to be a jackass, but that does say something. That said, Francesco, yeah, he's Italian, so that's going to be Francesco. Francesco Nuzzi, 11-2, 2 no contests. Huh. This is his UFC debut. I don't know. That's a tough one. The odds like Long. Oh, his family name. Sorry. Tapology does this weird. Because Tapology like doesn't reverse. They just kind of give them as presented. No, Tapology does reverse them. Okay, so yeah, Xiao is his family name, not Long. Okay, sorry, my mistake there. Um, I feel like they're kind of trying to get him a win a little bit, but I don't know enough about Nuzzi. So yeah, the odds like Xiao, I'm gonna respect that. But let me think about that one a little bit. God, I gotta rewatch a couple of the Garbrandt fight in particular. I gotta rewatch. Like, why could you get nothing going against that dude? Featherweight next. Good fight. Jack Jenkins and Sean Woodson. Yeah, Jack Jenkins, fun fighter, powerful calf kicks, bit of a gritty guy. 14-4, been a bit up and down. 4-2 in the UFC, so I mean, more ups than downs. But yeah, he had 2 solid wins to start: Don Shanis and Jamal Emmers, and he lost to Chepe Mariscal. He had suffered a arm injury in that one. Beat Herbert Burns, but who doesn't? Lost to Gabriel Santos, and then beat Ramon Tavares. That was September of last year. Had a fight with Marwan Rahiki fall out. I forget who caused that one to fall out. I think it was him because I think Rahiki fought on that card. Woodson, a freak for featherweight at like 6'2". Yeah, 13-2-1. Come here for loss to Dan Ige. He was doing real well until Ige finally found his chin in the third. There's a lot good about Woodson's game. He's going to have to be real cognizant of the low kicks, but he's huge for the weight class. He's an enormous featherweight. He's 6'2". He's taller than me. And huge legs, like just long, lanky. Dude has like no torso. He is all limbs. Um, Guys who can get inside on him can do some damage, but I tend to respect a lot of what Woodson's capable of. Whereas I like Jack Jenkins a lot. This is a good fight, but I'm gonna go with Woodson. And that's an early fight you can look forward to. Bantamweight next, Lawrence Liu and Hector Santiago. Let's see. Liu is 8-1. He's actually from New Zealand. Yeah, he's missing that star on the flag. Again, 8-1, 5-fight winning streak. Won a road to UFC finale on the UFC 325 to get to the UFC. Pretty tough fight he won, actually, if memory serves. Okay, and again, he's fighting Hector Santiago, who is 6-1, and I think also making his UFC debut. Officially, yeah, 2-fight winning streak. Okay. I don't think they're giving Liu a total layup, but I do like his chances here. Yeah, so do the general odds. Geez, I got a lot of favorites on this one. I got a couple of dogs on there, but women's strawweight. Song Yan gets another chance to try and make it first to try and make an impression. She had that weird fight with Angela Hill where she just Angela Hill just stood there and fought with her, and she allegedly wanted that, but a lot of Xiong's really good stuff comes against people who don't want to strike with her for the most part. So anyway, she's fighting Psycho Julia Pilastri. Another not a bad fight, actually. I get where it is on the card, but um, so yeah, Xiong is 19-3, coming off of that loss to Hill. Yeah, she's getting up there in age a little bit. Pilastri, 14-6, 2-3 in the UFC. When did she do? She lost to Josephine Knutson. She's still getting through that contender series deal. Beat Corey McKenna, lost to Lupi Godinez, beat Karolina Kovalkiewicz, lost to Talita Alencar. She really needs this one. The odds quite like Pilastri. I understand why. All right. You know what? This is going to be one of those where I'll pick Xiong, but if she loses here, I may never pick her again kind of deals. And kicking everything off, we have at welterweight Ding Meng and Cameron Nelson. So Meng is got a lot of fights, 35-10. I think lost his UFC debut? Yeah, he lost in the contender series too. What did he lose to there? Oh, Rami Hamed. Neither guy got a contract. He won in Uriah Faber's deal and then lost a split decision to Jose Souza. That was back in May. Okay. Nelson is 7-1. 5-fight winning streak. And coming into his UFC debut. That's a tough spot for Meng to be in. Sorry, Ding. Ugh. Meng is his would be his first name. So a little bit of a tough spot for Ding. He is the slight favorite. Close one. Yeah, I'll respect the odds again, but Ding did let me down last time. So anyway, there we are. See how I feel about a couple of those picks in the morning. That is UFC Fight Night 286. And Saturday morning, bright and early, when no rational human being would be awake, I will be awake and covering the event because that's me. I'm a professional. Darn it. Okay, let's go quickly through this. We've been at this for almost 2 hours, and I don't want to keep doing this all friggin' night. So let's talk a little bit about the other events from the weekend. In the PFL, we had PFL Tampa, which Ketlin Vieira got released from the UFC. I think the UFC just chose not to re-sign her. And signs with the PFL for a featherweight fight with Cyborg, and then she weighs 152. She missed weight by 7 pounds. Cyborg beats her up, wins a unanimous decision. Not a lot of controversy there. Cyborg, she's getting closer to the end, is all. Let's see, what else did I want to talk about there? Briefly, Taila Santos dropping another fight. So Taila Santos maybe should have got the decision over Valentina Shevchenko when they fought in 2022. That was super close, and you could very easily argue that for Santos. Then she loses to Blanchfield, and she gets cut. She wins several fights in the PFL, including beating Liz Carmouche, but then loses to Dakota Ditcheva. She rebounds okay with a win, but she loses again here, and we may be seeing her start to decline. Worth noting, Luke Trainer's front kick to the face of Roland Dunlap. 222 of the second is one of the better knockouts you'll see all year. That was brutal. In fact, let me update my list. I forgot to list that earlier. So yeah. Luke Trainer and Roland Dunlap. Yeah, look that up if you haven't seen it. That, even if you just look up the finish, brutal. Very brutal. The prelims worth talking about. Daniel Marcos getting a TKO win over Magomedov. Daniel Marcos was a little bit unfairly not re-signed by the UFC. I get that he had a few fights that weren't super exciting, but he's very good. Javid Basharat got a win, his PFL debut. That's fine. Dakota Bush got a split decision. So mostly, Chris Cyborg got the Vieira fight wasn't bad. A couple of fun flurries, but a lot of just Cyborg beating up Vieira. And it's hard to get invested in a fight when one of the fighters misses by that much weight. So there was that. But yeah, you know what? All in all, not a bad event from the PFL. And the MMA landscape could use a legitimate alternative to the UFC. I've mentioned this before. I don't need a super competitor. I don't need someone trying to run them out of business. I just need a viable alternative for a lot of reasons. On the boxing side of things, the big one this weekend was Teofimo Lopez bumped up to 147, I think, to win one of the titles. I forget which one, but he beat Rolando Rolly Romero. Weird fight. The most damage was probably done by Romero I think it was the fourth. It was 4 or 5. He cuts Lopez pretty badly around the outside of the right eyebrow with a left hook, and then catches him coming in with a right hand that doesn't quite drop Lopez, but gets pretty close. And then he just doesn't throw a whole lot for the rest of the fight. Then the scorecards are read, and one judge had it even through 12 rounds, which I don't get at all. This was not a super great fight, but Rolly just doesn't do a whole lot for huge stretches of it. And Lopez just fights a measured fight. This makes him a 3-weight world champion. That's certainly respectable. Lopez didn't look like a. This was certainly, I think commentary even said it, this is not going on the Teofimo Lopez highlight reel. But he did win. He did win fairly. And yeah, just really odd performance out of Romero when it was all said and done. So don't quite know where both guys go from there. But Lopez is still a decent name. And if he's able to kind of settle things down, he's always been a guy who's a little bit up and down. Has had some weird losses. I honestly didn't even think he beat Lomachenko. But yeah, so that was from the world of boxing. Yeah, that's kind of where we are there. And the last thing I have written down is we had some news about Noche UFC 3. The originally scheduled main event was Jeon Silva versus Yair Rodrigues, which was an iffy and mostly acceptable, a kind of weird fight because we're all still just wondering why they won't freaking make Yair Rodrigues and Diego Lopez. Yeah, then Yair Rodrigues pulls out of this fight. And in his place steps Jose Miguel Delgado. Good luck against Jeon Silva on short notice. I wasn't even going to pick Yair against Silva, but I gotta talk about Yair Rodrigues for a sec here. Because man, has that dude been very weird for the UFC. Well, let's go back in time a little bit here. His UFC debut is winning a season of the first season of the Ultimate Fighter Latin America. He beats Leonardo Morales to do it, if memory serves. He gets a split decision over Charles Rosa that was a little dubious. Gets a good win over Dan Hooker. Gets a solid win over Andre Fili. Head kicks him to knock him out. Split decision over Alex Caceres, which was so weird because there was no way that fight should have gone to Caceres. That was that was the UFC's debut in Salt Lake City. They certainly returned to it after a long absence. Then he knocks out the ghost of BJ Penn. Then Frankie Edgar beats the piss out of him and breaks his orbital bone, basically gets the fight stopped between rounds 2 and 3. He has a fight with Zabit Magomed Sharapov fallout. He has that crazy war with Chan Sung Jung. Then he's gone for almost a year, and he has a no contest with Jeremy Stevens after he poked Stevens in the eye. They rebooked that fight for a month or so later. He beats Stevens in a okay affair. Another time the Zabit fight falls out. He's scheduled to fight Max Holloway. That fight falls out. He gets rebooked. His best performance is that loss versus Holloway, by the way, because I gave him almost no shot, and he went. When I say he went life and death a little bit with Max, there's stretches of that fight where he gives Max hell. Those two beat the crap out of each other in that fight. It's a war that gets a little bit forgotten for a number of reasons. Then he has that weird win over Brian Ortega, but that's a while after that one. Then he's gone for about a year. Beats Josh Emmett via triangle choke to win an interim belt. Then a few months later, he does get the fight with Volk, and Volk handles him without difficulty. That seems to mess with him. He's gone for, again, not quite a year, but a while for a second fight with Ortega where he gets choked out this time. Then he's gone for over a year and he gets a decision over Pitbull in a very lackluster fight. And now about over a year later, that was April of 25. So a year and a half later, give or take, he pulls out of this fight. I mean, some of these gaps between fights, some of these are perfectly acceptably close together, but because let's see, there's a chunk between there. That's both in 15. Yeah, for a little bit he's on a decent pace. And then when does that fall apart? Yeah, kind of after the Edgar loss, that falls apart. Because that is May of 17. He doesn't even have this fight scheduled until September of 18, which falls apart. Then he fights Jung in November of 18. Then it's almost a year later for Stevens. Again, that gets rebooked, and he has several fights fall out. His relationship with the UFC has been very rocky at times. I think the UFC said he was cut at one point. They were just sick of dealing with him. Obviously, that wasn't actually true, but Dana White says a lot of crap. Because, that Stevens win is October of 19. He doesn't fight again until November of 21 when he fights Max Holloway. That's a chunk of time off. Then we already went through that. So, he's had several fights fall through. I don't know what we're doing with him. And at this point, if he was going to actually turn into something, he would have done it by now, but I don't know. I mean, look, if he's in, I think it was said he was injured, but let me double check that. Because he kind of mentioned why. Let me take a quick look over. Yeah, he got injured somehow, which is not surprising, dude. If you look at his fighting style, it's a lot of high octane stuff, especially kicks, and he has beat the crap out of his legs. Knees, feet, they've taken a pounding in training and in the cage. So I'm not surprising he's starting to break down a little bit. But so now your Noche main event in like Tempe, Arizona, even for this event. It's not even in Mexico this year. Delgado is a hometown boy, at least, so there's a little bit of a connection there. But yeah, you've got a Brazilian and an American fighting in your celebration of Mexican fighting. Yeah, I don't know how much we need an annual Noche event, but I don't know. They're putting there's more effort being put into the Zuffa boxing event on that same night than there is into the UFC one. So, anywho, that's where that is. Alrighty. That is gonna pretty much be it for me. So let me do the old social media check, and if there's nothing new and relevant to the combat sports game, I didn't. Now, real quick, RAF had an event where Jordan Burroughs scored a really big win. Tyron Woodley finally got his first win of some variety in a great number of years when he came back from a point deficit to outpoint and defeat Joaquin Buckley. And there was a rematch between Merab Dvalishvili and Henry Cejudo. Their previous wrestling bout, Merab won on points. Big upset. This time around, Cejudo pins him in 32 seconds. Yeah. So, fun enough stuff. RAF's a little bit in a weird spot, though, where they've made some matches that are just like, hey, a giant chunk of our audience is MMA fans looking to see guys they used to remember. and we'll see how that goes. I don't know. There's a lot about RAF that I like, but you've got, hey, let's put Michael Venom Page against Alexander Shlemenko in a wrestling match. Like, what the heck are we doing? Okay, so let's check the social medias and then potentially get out of here. Let's see. No, not related, not related. Apparently, both Movsar Evloev and Alexander Volkanovski are mentioning that they might retire if they lose their fight. Be the funniest thing in the world if Movsar loses and does it. No, I don't care about that. Yeah, Eddie Hearn beefing with Saudi a little bit, not too surprising. Oh. Yeah, I think we're gonna be. I think we're about ready to be done. Yeah, let's call that. We're over 2 hours and I'm not seeing anything new. So, plugs. I've got stuff to plug this week. Monday on Damn You Hollywood, myself and Mark Radulich, I think it's just the two of us, but let me double check that. We'll be reviewing the annual Jason Statham movie, Mutiny. Yeah, this is the annual, again, Jason Statham playing Jason Statham, which is fine. I don't begrudge him that. I don't begrudge these movies existing. Everyone knows what they're up, what's up. Last week we reviewed The End of Oak Street, where Mark and I had a pretty good discussion about a pretty good movie. Let's see. That's not me. That's not me. So yeah, Mutiny this week. Next week is going to be Coyote versus Acme. That should also be fun. I signed up for a bunch of triple features that I may regret, but that's okay. I don't mind. I never regret the conversations I have with Mark. So that's you can find me doing that. Usual spate of coverage, WWE SmackDown on Fridays. Then I'm just going to stay up until I'm done with the UFC event. So long day. This last SmackDown had a very good match between CM Punk and Kevin Owens. Probably the best SmackDown match all year. Certainly off the top of my head, it is the best all year. And almost nothing else of note. The rest of that card was pretty much phoned in, and I am no me gusta. Then yeah, so the fallout from all that Friday, and then Saturday early morning the UFC event, and Sunday we'll be back here Sunday/Monday. We will review the Shanghai card, and let me have a look at the old preview. We will preview, yes, fifth, quick math, yes. We will preview the UFC's return to France, headlined by Dan Hooker versus welcoming to the UFC Saladin Parnasse. What is on that card? So Hooker and Parnasse is a really good fight. Fedas Ziam and Axel Sola, that's a good fight. Michael Page and Nursultan Ruzboyev, the UFC is pissed at Page. Morgan Chartier and Felipe Lima. Chartier, he needs a rebound. Hossein Qaeda getting his second shot, more or less, and Muhammad Naimov, another guy not getting any breaks. Good grief. Mario Pinto and Ryan Spann. Curtis Campbell and Trevor Peake. Umar Sy and Modestus Bakauskas. Nathaniel Wood and Myron Santos. That's not a bad fight. Poor Nathaniel Wood, man. What's that guy got to do? Him and Arnold Allen just really out there struggling to make headway. Nora Cornol and Claudia Seguya. Matthew Lethlow Duclos and okay, don't know these people. Sofia Montenegro and Delphine Benoit. Oh, Fabia Sintes and Michael Aljarouge, and then Punahele Soriano and Daniil Donchenko. That's actually a good fight. Soriano and Donchenko will beat the crap out of each other. So that's actually a. Not saying there's not stuff in there to be like, I don't need this, but generally speaking, that's a really solid card. So, at least on paper. All right, that's going to do it for me for the evening, everybody. So, thank you. Much appreciated for you tuning in live after the fact, whenever. I'm good with any and all of it. So, thank you. Interact as always, much appreciated. Subscribe, comment. If you happen to catch me live, feel free to chat. I react and respond to you guys whenever possible. So, hope to see you all next time. Until then, thanks again. Stay safe out there as always and continue to be well, be safe, and behave. Next time. See ya. Yeah.